Chapter 564. Lu Jiao thought that she had already decided who she wanted to acknowledge as her master, so he said excitedly, Okay, I'll go with you. Yi Ran also walked over. He glanced at the two of them nervously and patted his chest. You scared me to death. Lu Yuanzhou, you're too bold. Fortunately, nothing happened this time. Don't go in casually again. Chu Liwei raised her eyebrows slightly. Indeed, she wouldn't go in casually. The next time she came, she would probably deal with all the trouble here. After making sure that the two of them were fine, they went back together. When they returned to Zhengfeng Hall, where Yu Qisong was, Chu Liwei went in alone with Chang Wanzhou. Elder Shui seemed to be busy with something else, so Yu Qisong was the only one left in the hall. Upon seeing the two of them, Yu Qisong smiled and said, How do you feel? Have you made up your mind? Chu Liwei nodded. Both little Zhou and I want to acknowledge you as our master. Wei Qisong was both pleasantly surprised and shocked. Both of them were extremely outstanding, so he valued and liked them very much. Of course, he was happy that they were willing to acknowledge him as their master. However, at the same time, he had his own concerns. Have you made up your mind? Elder Xiaoi's current strength is stronger than mine. Yu Qisong said frankly. Chu Liwei looked determined. We've already made up our mind. Otherwise, we wouldn't have chosen Chongshu Pavilion. Yu Qisong was filled with many emotions. But, since you're willing to acknowledge me as your master, I'll definitely teach you everything I know. I'll tell Shui later and ask him to prepare the ceremony. There's no need to go through so much trouble. Chu Liwei said, Pavilion Master, the ceremony is for outsiders to see. It's not important. What's important is that little Zhou and I have already acknowledged you. As he spoke, Chu Liwei suddenly took a step back. Then he knelt on the ground and solemnly kowtowed. Yu Qisong was stunned and hurriedly helped her up. What are you doing? Pavilion Master, if you don't mind, from today onwards, I will be your disciple. Yu Qisong's hand froze in midair. The young girl kneeling in front of him had an incomparably serious expression on her face. There seemed to be a faint light floating in her pair of black glass-like eyes. His heart felt like it had been hit hard by something, and even his eyes started to sting. Chu Liu's lips curved up slightly. He kowtowed again. Chu Liu solemnly completed the apprenticeship ceremony. Get up. Yu Qisong suppressed the excitement in his heart. Chu Liu stood up. Disciple Chu Liu greets master. Yu Qisong didn't know what to say. Since the sneak attack on the Chongshu Pavilion and the accidental death of his only son, Yu Qilang, he had been depressed. If it weren't for the fear of ruining the Chongshu Pavilion in his hands and the fear that his disciples would be bullied when they went out, he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to hold on. Chang Wanzhou also followed the same process to become a disciple. Yu Qisong's voice was a little trembling. Good children. You are all good children. Now, the Chongshu Pavilion is no longer the same as before, and I have nothing to give you. Only this. As he spoke, he slowly and carefully took out 2 golden whistles from the Ring of Cosmos. There is a trace of my power on these whistles. As long as you blow them, no matter where you are, I will immediately come to you. Yu Qisong said as he handed over the whistles. There was deep nostalgia and pain in his eyes. These whistles. I made them myself. I plan to give them to Lang Lang and little Yue. But they don't need them now, so I will give them to you. Chu Liu's heart skipped a beat. Making these things consumed a lot of force and spirit, and it might take a long time for them to recover. Yu Qisong actually made 2 of them. And just now, he said that one was for Yu Qilang and the other, Master, who did you say this is for? Chu Liu asked in an extremely soft voice. Yu Qisong smiled bitterly. Look at me, I always call her little Yueya, and I'm used to it. In fact, she is the former princess of the Tianling dynasty. Now that she is no longer here, you may not have heard of her, so it's normal that you don't know her. He rubbed the whistle in his hand. In fact, she can be considered as half of my disciple. Originally, I had planned to give this to her on her wedding day. Unexpectedly, she didn't get it. I won't have such a chance anymore. Chu Liyue's mind was blank, and her body was stiff as she took the whistle. She rubbed her fingers and seemed to engrave something. She turned the whistle over. There was indeed a small word Q engraved on it. Chang Wanzhou, who was beside her, took the other whistle. He turned his head and saw that Chu Liyue's reaction seemed to be a little abnormal, so he casually glanced at it. When he looked, he saw the words on it. He was stunned for a moment. She is also called Yu? Yu Qi-song nodded. Yes. That is little Yuea's name. Coincidentally, Lu Yu's name also has the word Yu. This is probably a kind of fate? Lu Yu, you don't mind, do you? Chu Liyue took a deep breath and looked up with a bright smile. How can that be? This is a gift from Master, so it is naturally extremely precious. If she knows that you treat her so well, she will definitely be very happy. Yu Qi-song sighed. I hope so. Chu Liyue suppressed the waves in her heart and carefully put away the whistle. On the other hand, Chang Wanzhou, who was at the side, was stunned. Then he looked at Yu Qi-song and asked, Master, has the little Yuea you mentioned been to Nanjiang before? Yu Qi-song thought for a moment and shook her head. Nanjiang is dangerous and desolate. She probably hasn't been there before. A hint of disappointment flashed across Chang Wanzhou's face. Chu Liyue sighed softly in her heart. This child, she really didn't know how long she would be searching in such a daze. Chu Liyue sorted out her thoughts in her mind and said, Master, actually, little Zhou and I have something to discuss with you today. The medicinal garden before Chongshu Pavilion, the soil there is poisonous. You should know that, right? Yu Qi-song's expression changed slightly. You went there? Chu Liyue immediately said, Don't be angry. Don't be angry and don't worry. Let me finish. Little Zhou and I found that something was wrong there today, so we went to check it out. You even went in. Yu Qi-song really couldn't calm down this time. The guts of these two people were too big. Chu Liyue coughed. Master, we're all fine. Aren't we fine? Moreover, we found that there's something under there. Have you heard of mixed yuan gravel? Yu Qi-song frowned. Mixed yuan gravel? What's that? Chu Liyue then briefly explained the matter. Yu Qi-song's expression changed several times. When Chu Liyue proposed to use herself as bait, Yu Qi-song finally couldn't help but stand up and say in a deep voice, I don't agree. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 565. This was too dangerous. How could he let Chu Liyue do it? You're only a rank 4 warrior now. How can you take such a big risk? Even if someone has to do it, it should be me. He was the pavilion master of the Chongshu Pavilion. No one should do this more than him. Chu Liyue shook her head. Master, I'm sure you know best what your body is like. Yu Qi-song frowned. But it definitely can't be you. In this world, how could he let a disciple he had just acknowledged do such a thing? If you can't find a suitable person, then find another way. In short, I will never agree to this. Chu Liyue had expected him to have such a reaction. In fact, she didn't intend to tell Yu Qi-song, but this was the Chongshu Pavilion after all. No movement could escape Yu Qi-song's eyes. Instead of being in a mess, it was better to make things clear now. She stood quietly at the side and waited for Yu Qi-song to finish speaking before explaining unhurriedly, Master, this is the only feasible way at the moment. If it isn't resolved as soon as possible, the entire Qingyuan mountain will be completely destroyed. Can you bear to? The Chongshu Pavilion had existed for hundreds of years. It had been built on Qingyuan Mountain since its establishment. If they had to abandon Qingyuan Mountain, it would be a big blow to the people of the Chongshu Pavilion. It wasn't easy for you to protect the Chongshu Pavilion. Can you really bear to watch all of this happen? Yu Qi-song closed his eyes in pain. Of course I can't bear to. As long as I can protect the Chongshu Pavilion, I won't hesitate even if I have to risk my life. Lu, it can't be you. It can't be you. Master, I have absolute confidence that I can ensure success. That's why I rushed over to discuss this matter with you. Chu Liyue said word by word. Yu Qi-song frowned and looked at Chu Liyue. The girl in front of him still had a hint of youthfulness in her eyes. However, her expression was incomparably calm, and her black jade-like eyes were calm. She was so confident and certain. Anyone who saw her expression would probably be convinced by her. Yuchi-song closed his eyes and finally took a deep breath. He stared at Chu Liyue's eyes seriously. "Lu Yu, I'm grateful that you want to do this. But if this will threaten you, I will definitely not agree. Unless, you can prove that you can do this." He wanted her to hand over her trump card and prove her strength. Of course, Wei Qisong knew that Chu Liyue's abilities weren't what they seemed on the surface. The fact that she was able to get first place in the Wanzheng competition already. However, this matter was too big, he didn't dare take the risk. Chu Liyue blinked, and her lips curved up slightly. The room was silent. Chu Liyue stood there quietly and gently closed her eyes. The next moment, a vigorous force surged out of her body. A suppressive force spread out. Early stage, fourth stage. Yuchi-song stared at Chu Liyue. He wanted to see where her confidence came from. Martial technique? Yuan instrument? Or something else? However, he soon realized that Chu Liyue's aura was actually rising. In just a few breaths, she had already reached mid-stage, fourth stage. Yuchi-song's eyes widened slightly. Could it be that Chu Liyue had been hiding her true strength? Her realm had actually long surpassed early stage, fourth stage. No, her aura was actually still growing. Peak fourth stage. Yuchi-song's lips moved. What realm is she at? This question was directed at Chang Wanzhou, who was standing next to him. Chang Wanzhou answered honestly. "I don't know either." He really didn't know. In short, Chu Liyue was stronger than him. Soon, under Yuchi-song's shocked gaze, Chu Liyue's suppressive force had surpassed that of a fifth-stage warrior. However, what made Yuchi-song feel even more incredulous was that Chu Liyue had no intention of stopping. Then, middle stage, fifth stage. Peak fifth stage. Sixth stage. Yuchi-song finally couldn't help but take a breath of cold air. However, Chu Liyue was still continuing. Middle stage, sixth stage. Peak sixth stage. Yuchi-song finally reacted at this time. He raised his hand and set up a barrier in the room. If this movement were to spread, who knew how big of a commotion it would cause? Chu Liyue's eyebrows moved slightly. The force in the water droplets surged out again. Bang. Seventh stage. At this point, the aura on Chu Liyue's body finally stopped rising crazily. When he saw Chu Liyue open his eyes, Yuchi-song inexplicably heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. Yuchi-song, who had seen countless storms in his life, was so shocked that he couldn't speak for a long time. Chu Liyue smiled. "Master, do you still want to continue?" Yuchi-song's heart, which had just been relieved, was suspended again. Still continue?" Chu Liyue nodded seriously. "Yes. If you think this isn't enough to prove my strength, then, enough. Yuchi-song's eyelids twitched violently. His previous suspicions had already vanished. However, the doubts in his heart suddenly rose. "Chu Liyue, how did he do it?" "You hid your true realm," Yuchi-song spoke with difficulty. "Wasn't Chu Liyue less than 15 years old this year? How could he already be a seventh-stage warrior?" "Don't misunderstand, I'm not a seventh-stage warrior, it's just that there's this level of power in my body." Chu Liyue chose a more tactful explanation. Yuchi-song was silent for a while, looked at Chu Liyue with a complicated gaze, and finally said, "I promise you." Chu Liyue was overjoyed, and only then did he retract the aura around him. The surging force surged back into the water droplets floating quietly in his dantian. However, this force couldn't even cause a ripple in the water droplets. Like raindrops falling into the sea, it disappeared silently. After all the force returned, Chu Liyue also heaved a sigh of relief. This was actually just the power stored in the water droplets, and it didn't belong to him. Fortunately, as his strength increased, his control over the water droplets also began to gradually increase. Now, it was still possible for him to use some of the power to help him fill up the stage. Wei Qisong stared at her solemnly for a long while before he seemed to have finally understood something. "In that case, you can borrow the force of another powerhouse?" Chu Liyue was stunned. "Another powerhouse? Did Yuchi-song think that I have the power of another powerhouse?" She wanted to explain, but on second thought, this explanation sounded more reasonable. Thus, she thought for a moment and nodded. Yes. Yuchi Song suddenly understood. As expected. Perhaps she also relied on this mysterious and powerful force to win first place in the Tianling God realm previously? But no matter what, he felt much more at ease. That's good, that's good, Chu Liwei knew that he agreed, and her eyes curved. Suddenly, a teasing voice sounded in her heart. Girl, I can indeed lend you my power. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 566. Taizu? Chu Liwei didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Why did Taizu come to join in the fun at this time? Don't joke with me. Sheng Guanjing said seriously. I'm not joking. Although I'm just a remnant of my will now, I still have the strength to help you. Chu Liue's heart warmed. Then I'll thank you in advance. Although there might not be a chance, it was worth it with Taizu's words. What's there to thank me for? I've been in the Tianling divine realm for thousands of years and I'm already tired of it. If I didn't meet you, I wouldn't have the chance to come out again. For some reason, my strength seems to have become stronger during this period of time. Sheng Guanjing said curiously. Chu Liwei was also very surprised. Aren't you just a will? How did you become stronger? I don't know either. Sheng Guanjing was also very puzzled. However, this was still a good thing, so he couldn't be bothered to think too much about it. It didn't seem like a bad idea to accompany this girl around. Chu Liwei didn't know whether to laugh or cry. After thinking for a while, he put this matter to the back of his mind and began to discuss the matter of the messed yuan gravel with Yuchi Song and Chang Wanzhou. Peerless Palace. Inside and outside the magnificent palace, corpses were everywhere, and blood flowed like a river. The smell of blood soared into the sky, almost suffocating. Many heavily armored soldiers had already surrounded the entire main hall of the Peerless Palace. In the middle stood the Peerless Palace's palace master, Zhang Yufeng. Behind him stood about 100 people. Each and every one of them were more or less injured. They appeared to be in a very miserable state. At this moment, their gazes were all on the man in front of them. He was dressed in black and wore a cloak. The biting cold wind swept past, rolling up the corners of his clothes. He was solemn and dignified. His deep eyes were like thousand-year-old ice that was filled with thick killing intent. It was daunting. Rong Xiu, what did our Peerless Palace do wrong? Why do you want to kill us all? Zhang Yufeng's eyes were bloodshot as he glared at Rong Xiu, the man who had mercilessly destroyed the entire Peerless Palace. Rong Xiu's expression was calm, but his eyes were cold. Others may not know what he did wrong, but Zhang Yufeng, don't tell me you don't know. Do you think you can kill I after leaving heaven's canopy? His thin lips curled up slightly, his eyes filled with disdain. Aren't you guys overestimating yourselves? His tone was very calm, and the way he looked at Zhang Yufeng and the others was as cold and indifferent as if he was looking at ants. Zhang Yufeng's hatred grew. Rong Xiu did not even put the Peerless Palace in his eyes. This kind of gaze made him feel as if he was a clown. If he could, he would rush up and kill Rong Xiu. No. If it was outside heaven's canopy, Rong Xiu's realm was suppressed and he was alone, he might have some hope. And now, they would be the ones to die. Zhang Yufeng's heart was filled with regret. If he had sent more people, Rong Xiu might have been killed long ago, and today's disaster would not have happened. Zhang Yufeng took a deep breath and said, Rong Xiu, you are so cruel and ruthless, aren't you afraid of being punished by the other tribes? Previously, it was because he knew Rong Xiu would have such concerns that he dared to test Rong Xiu's bottom line again and again. There were a few times when he even threatened Rong Xiu's life, but he had been enduring. What was going on this time? Rong Xiu's lips curled up slightly, but the smile did not reach his eyes. I have given you enough chances. Besides, I haven't been back for a while, and I need a chance to set the rules. Your Peerless Palace has taken the initiative to come to Ai's door and solved my problem. Previously, he had been holding back. On the one hand, he was still preparing, and on the other hand, he deliberately drew out these people in the dark. Now that everything was ready, there was nothing to worry about. This knife had to be deep enough and ruthless enough. Zhang Yufang suddenly realized that Rong Xiu was clearly killing the chicken to warn the monkey. And they just so happened to become the sacrificial lambs. Why would he be worried about the criticism or even impeachment of the other tribes? This was what he had been waiting for. What recuperation, what showing weakness? From the beginning to the end, it was just a setup. Rong Xiu raised his sword. The sword fell. Zhang Yufang's heart was filled with deep despair. The soldiers who had been waiting for a long time immediately rushed up. Soon, it became a complete one-sided massacre. Rong Xiu looked down at this scene from above, his expression calm and his eyes indifferent. All kinds of screams and sounds of fighting rang out, but gradually died down. At this moment, a clear bird's cry suddenly rang out. Yan Qing raised his hand, and the bird landed on his arm. Standing close to it, one could tell that this was not a real magical beast, but a finely crafted sparrow. At first glance, it looked lifelike, no different from an ordinary bird. Yan Qing lightly knocked on the bird's head. It opened its mouth and spat out a small ball. Yan Qing looked at Rong Xiu and respectfully handed over the small ball. Your Highness, it's news from the West Hill. Previously, Your Highness had already said that all news from the West Hill should be handed over to him. Although this news came a little suddenly, Yan Qing still obeyed the order. Rong Xiu raised his hand, and the small ball flew into his palm. Long Xiu's fair fingers gently crushed it, and it turned into powder. The powder quickly condensed in the air, and a few lines of words were pieced together. Rong Xiu's gaze swept over the few lines of words, and his sword-like eyebrows raised slightly. Yan Qing and Yuemo were standing at the side, and suddenly felt that their Highness's aura suddenly turned cold. The two immediately looked at each other. The news from the West Hill should be related to that person. But shouldn't His Highness be happy? Why was it that? Yuemo quickly glanced at the few lines of words. Whose money? Rong Xiu waved his finger, and the words silently disappeared. He glanced at Yuemo indifferently. Yuemo's heart skipped a beat, and he quickly lowered his head. He really only saw those few words. Why was His Highness so murderous? It was even more intense than when he ordered the people of the unparalleled palace to be killed. What was going on? Yuemo, Rong Xiu said indifferently. Yes, Your Highness. Yuemo hurriedly replied. I'll leave Zhang Yufang to you. Yuemo was shocked. Zhang Yufang was the palace master of the unparalleled palace, and his strength was extraordinary. At most, he could barely fight him to a draw, but His Highness said, leave it to him. This was not so simple. Your Highness. Yuemo was about to open his mouth to beg for mercy, but he immediately sensed His Highness's cold gaze, and he immediately shut his mouth. Yan Qing looked at him without sympathy. Serves him right. If he knew it was news from the West Hill, he would have dared to court death. If not him, who would he punish? What exactly was the news that provoked His Highness to this extent? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 567. Yan Qing. Yes, Your Highness. Go to the West Hill and give this to her, said Rong Xiu as he took out a silver cosmic ring. Yan Qing took it with both hands and asked hesitantly, You mean, now? Now, said Rong Xiu simply, and his voice was cold. A wave of coldness suddenly swept over. Yan Qing immediately bowed respectfully. Yes, Your Highness. After that, she immediately turned and left. Yuemo was stunned. He left just like that. What was the matter that made him so anxious? Also, what was he going to do now that Yan Qing was gone? Yuemo, Rong Xiu glanced at him indifferently. Yuemo tensed up. Yes, Your Highness. You can go back when you finish off Zhang Yufang. Yuemo blacked out. Your Highness. He struggled on his deathbed, wanting to save himself one last time. Rong Xiu asked faintly. I'll go now. Yuemo charged into the chaotic battlefield as though he was facing death. Although it was a little difficult, Zhang Yufang was already injured and should be easier to deal with now. Moreover, there were so many soldiers around, Everyone back off. Make room for Lord Yu. Rong Xiu said lightly. Yes, Your Highness. The soldiers were well trained and obeyed orders. As soon as they responded to the command, they retreated in unison. Zhang Yufeng, who was in the middle of killing, suddenly appeared in Yu Mo's sight. The corner of Yu Mo's eyes twitched. He regretted it so much. He shouldn't have looked at him like that. What terrible thing had happened in the West Hill? Chongshu Pavilion. The sun was shining brightly and there were no clouds for thousands of miles. Chu Luiwei and the others came to the old herb garden again. So, Master, you still don't know who broke into the Chongshu Pavilion that day? Along the way, Chu Luiwei obtained a lot of information from Yu Qisong. Although he had heard Lu Jiao mention it before, he was not at the Chongshu Pavilion that day. It was more convenient and accurate to ask Yu Qisong about these things. Sure enough, Chu Luiwei discovered many details that Lu Jiao hadn't mentioned before. Those people are very powerful, and all of them are wearing masks and black robes. They came at night, so I didn't see anything clearly. Although more than a year had passed, Yu Qisong could still recall the scene vividly. Everything that happened that day was deeply engraved in his mind, becoming the deepest and most painful scar that could not be erased. The other party came prepared and caught us off guard. They didn't even have time to protect the lives of the elders and disciples in the pavilion, let alone the medicinal garden. When we came back after everything was over, the guards were all dead. Yu Qisong's seemingly calm face trembled slightly. At that time, we saw that many medicinal herbs in the medicinal garden were damaged. We wanted to check it out, but because of the heavy casualties in the pavilion, we didn't pay attention to it for a while. Who knew? Who knew that the next day, the remaining medicinal herbs had all withered? A month later, the medicinal garden was already in ruins. At that time, we sent people to continue planting medicinal herbs, only to find that the soil of the medicinal garden could no longer grow any useful medicinal herbs. But by then it was too late. Chu Liwei listened seriously while thinking silently in his heart. Since this messed yuan gravel is something from Nanjiang, then only those who have been to Nanjiang can have this thing. Master, do you know who in the Tianling dynasty has been to Nanjiang in recent years? Yu Qisong paused for a while before saying, Jiang Yuqing has been there. Digression. You have to get the ideal results for the college entrance examination. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 568. He had been there? Chu Liwei was very surprised. When? Yu Qisong narrowed his eyes and recalled for a while before saying, it was probably after little Yuya was gone. At that time, everyone said that little Yuya was possessed by the devil. He heard that there was a medicine in Nanjiang that could bring people back to life, so he brought people there, but he couldn't find it after that. Instead, most of the people he brought there were killed. After that, Jiang Yuqing recuperated for a long time. He didn't even go to little Yuya's funeral. Chu Liwei widened her eyes slightly. Funeral? How was that possible? At that time, her Tianjing Yuan meridian had been damaged and her entire body had been destroyed and completely dissipated. How could she still? Yes. Originally, according to little Yuya's identity, it should have been a grand funeral. However, because the name of Qi deviation was really unpleasant, it was just an ordinary funeral for a princess. Chu Liwei only felt that it was ridiculous and ridiculous. Those people tried to force her into a dead end, but in the end, they didn't forget to hold a funeral for her? That's right. Of course they had to do that. Only in this way could they be cleared of suspicion. And the so-called, in order to save her, he went to Nanjiang without hesitation. Jiang Yuqing was actually a complete actor. He obviously went to Nanjiang for other reasons. He was just using her as a cover. However, in the eyes of others, they might still think that he was extremely infatuated. Deep hatred surged out from the bottom of her heart. It almost caused her chest to explode. The fists in her sleeves were already clenched so tightly that her bones were almost crushed. Jiang Yuqing, you're really good. Seeing that Chu Liwei lowered her head and didn't move, Yu Qisong asked with concern, Chu Liwei, are you okay? Chu Liwei closed her eyes. When she raised her head again, Her expression had returned to normal. She smiled faintly and said, "Nothing. I was just thinking, what kind of heavenly treasure is it? It's so magical that it can actually attract eldest young master Jiang to go there regardless of his life." As she spoke, she looked at Chang Wanzhou. "Little boat, you grew up in southern border. Have you ever heard of such a thing?" Chang Wanzhou shook his head. "No." Yuchi Song pondered for a moment and said, "Actually, I have always had my suspicions about this matter. However, I have never had any evidence. Now, it seems that he went to the southern border not for Little Crescent, but for something else. If the messed yuan gravel was really brought back by him." Yuchi Song suddenly thought of something. He frowned and stopped. Chu Luiyue took a step forward. "Master, I haven't been in West Hill for long, but I've heard a lot about the Chongshu Pavilion. I want to ask you a question. Is there someone secretly targeting the Chongshu Pavilion?" Yuchi Song's face seemed to have aged several years in an instant. He slowly sighed and smiled bitterly. "You're so smart. It's normal for you to guess. That's right. Since that incident more than a year ago, someone has indeed been targeting our Chongshu Pavilion. They've been making things difficult for us both openly and secretly. You dismissed many disciples in the sect because of this." Yuchi Song nodded stiffly. A hint of bitterness flashed across his face. Before this, he had never imagined that he would be forced to such a state. Chu Luiyue paused and asked in a low voice, "That person is the third Princess Shangguan?" Yuchi Song suddenly looked at Chu Luiyue and asked in surprise, "How did you—" "No, it's not her." Yuchi Song began to deny it, but his previous reaction had already proved that Chu Luiyue's guess was correct. Chu Luiyue frowned. Why would she do this? Was it just because Yuchi Song was half her master and had a close relationship with her? But if that was the case, Shangguan had too many people to deal with. Shangguan would be exhausted if she dealt with them one by one. Moreover, the Chongshu Pavilion was at its peak at that time. It was not easy to deal with them. It would take a lot of manpower and resources. Speaking of which, it was simply a thankless task. Shangguan would only do this if she was out of her mind. Yuchi Song refused to answer Chu Luiyue's question. "Luyu, this has nothing to do with you. Don't continue to guess and don't get involved in this matter. I'm already a disciple of the Chongshu Pavilion. How can it have nothing to do with me? She doesn't only want to harm you, but also the entire Chongshu Pavilion. Luyu, Master is begging you." Yuchi Song's eyes flashed with a hint of pain and struggle as he said in a deep voice. Chu Luiyue suddenly paused. After a moment, she finally nodded. "Okay." Yuchi Song let out a long sigh. Of course, he knew that Chu Luiyue was doing this for him, and also for the entire Chongshu Pavilion. However, this matter involved too many people and was full of danger. He really didn't want to drag these two children down with him. The room fell into a short silence. Chang Wanzhou suddenly said, "Those who have used the messed yuan gravel will leave traces on their bodies." Chu Luiyue and Yuchi Song looked over at the same time. "What did you say?" Chang Wanzhou raised his hand. "If you want to use the messed yuan gravel, you need to use fresh blood as a primer. The person who acted as the primer would leave a very faint red line from the palm to the wrist." Chu Luiyue's eyes lit up. "So, as long as we find a way to see Jiang Yuqing's hand, we can confirm whether he did it or not." "Yes." Yuchi Song was delighted at first, but then he frowned and said, "This method is simple, but it's also troublesome. Jiang Yuqing is now in a high position and has guards around him. It's not so easy to get close to him. Besides, even if he's really the mastermind behind this, he might not do it himself. This messed yuan gravel needed fresh blood as a primer and could devour the force in a person's body. It was extremely strange. Jiang Yuqing could have just sent a subordinate to do it. Why did he have to do it himself?" Chang Wanzhou said, "If this matter involves him, then he must have done it himself." Chu Luiyue immediately asked, "Why?" "Because only in this way can he completely control the situation of the messed yuan gravel. And more importantly, a part of the devouring power of the messed yuan gravel will enter his body and improve his cultivation." Chu Luiyue's pupils constricted slightly. It turned out that the messed yuan gravel had such a function. This kind of behavior was really sinister and despicable. However, it really seemed like something Jiang Yuqing would do. Chu Luiwen knew him too well. In the past, his talent was not as good as hers. Although he didn't say it on the surface, he had always been very concerned about this matter in his heart. Although he was already considered a top genius compared to most people, he was still not satisfied. He was very diligent on the path of cultivation. In order to improve his strength, he could almost be considered crazy. Now that there was such a way, he might not give it a try. Chu Luiwen said firmly, in any case, he has been to Nanjiang, so there's this possibility. Whether he did it or not, we'll know once we investigate. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 569. Tianling Palace. Jiang Yuqing hurriedly came to Huayang Palace. When the palace servants saw him, they all bowed respectfully. Greetings, Prince Consort. Jiang Yuqing asked in a low voice, where's the third princess? A palace servant said, the third princess just rested in the side palace. When Jiang Yuqing heard this, he immediately went to the side palace. A few palace servants immediately went forward to stop him. Prince Consort, the third princess hasn't been sleeping well these few days, and she finally fell asleep with much difficulty. Why don't you wait first? Jiang Yuqing's gaze turned cold. I have something to discuss with the third princess. If it's delayed, can you bear the responsibility? The few palace servants were shocked and looked at each other. Miss Chan Yi instructed us to stop anyone who comes to see the princess, but this person is the prince consort after all. Jiang Yuqing walked forward. When he was about to reach the door, Chan Yi, who was standing in front of the door, bowed. Prince consort, the third princess is currently taking a nap. Please wait for a while. Jiang Yuqing sneered. I'm the third princess's prince consort. Do I have to listen to a palace servant like you about whether I can see the third princess? Chan Yi knew that he was really angry, so she immediately knelt down. I don't dare. But the third princess, I'll take responsibility for anything. As he spoke, Jiang Yuqing had already walked around her, walked to the door, and pushed it open with one hand. Chan Yi looked on nervously. Jiang Yuqing glanced at her coldly and pushed the door open. He directly walked in and went behind the screen to see Shangguan sleeping on the small couch. Hearing the commotion, she knitted her brows and opened her eyes. Yuqing? Why you here? She looked tired, and there were 2 dark circles under her eyes. It was obvious that she hadn't rested well recently. When she realized that Jiang Yuqing actually barged in himself, anger flashed across her face. What did this consort tell you? Chan Yi looked down. I didn't do my job well. Third princess, please punish me. Jiang Yuqing walked over. Don't blame her. I was too worried about you, so I insisted on coming in. You know that they don't dare to stop me. Shangguan's expression eased a little. Go kneel outside for 4 hours. Yes. Chan Yi agreed and obediently knelt down. Jiang Yuqing sat down next to Shangguan and tidied up her messy hair. Haven't you been sleeping well these past few days? Why don't you light some nerve-soothing incense? Shangguan lay back down. Yes, but it's useless. She hesitated for a moment before whispering, I don't know why, but I've been feeling uneasy lately. Sometimes, I even have nightmares. Jiang Yuqing comforted her for a while. Shangguan took the initiative to ask. By the way, why are you here today? Jiang Yuqing's eyes flickered. I have some free time today, so I thought I'd come and see you. Also, I heard that you summoned Yang Qin to the palace the other day? Shangguan curled her lips without a smile. He was indeed here for this. That's right. Jiang Yuqing saw her calm expression and didn't know how to ask. After deliberating for a while, he said, You haven't let her go yet, right? The smile on Shangguan's face deepened. That's right. I looked for her and told her that everything is fine in the Tianling God realm, and the Long Yuan sword is still there. What she said previously was all fake. Jiang Yuqing had already guessed this outcome, so he wasn't surprised. Isn't this the best outcome? As for Yang Qin, it's indeed wrong for her to deceive you and me, but I think she just misunderstood and didn't do it on purpose. After all, no one would joke about their own life, right? Just punish her slightly and let her go. Sheng Wanwan laughed. What are you worried about? I saw that her attitude of admitting her mistake wasn't bad, so I didn't pursue the matter further and let her stay in the palace for 2 more days. Is there something wrong? Jiang Yuqing's expression finally turned cold. What? You're too impulsive. It's true that she has a Daijing Yuan meridian, but we already agreed not to act rashly. How can you detain her in the palace? Do you think I don't know what you're planning to do? Sheng Wanwan looked at him coldly with a mocking gaze. You came here just to tell this consort these things? Seeing her stubborn attitude, Jiang Yuqing got even angrier and stood up abruptly. Knock knock. There was a knock on the door. Third princess, I heard that you're already up. I made longan and lily porridge for you. Do you want some? Hearing this voice, Jiang Yuqing was stunned as he turned around to look. This was clearly Yang Qin's voice. He looked at Sheng Wanwan in bewilderment. You didn't. Sheng Wanwan didn't look at him and just said lazily, Come in. Creak. The door opened, and a woman walked in with a bowl of porridge. It was Yang Qin. Jiang Yuqing quickly scanned her body, and she didn't seem to have any abnormalities. Greetings, Prince Consort. Yang Qin bowed to him again and put down the porridge. I've said it a few times. I like you, so I'm keeping you for a few more days. Just leave these things to the palace servants. Yang Qin smiled gently. Qin understands. Sheng Wanwan waved her hand. I still have something to discuss with Prince Consort. You can leave first. Yes. Then remember to use this porridge. It won't taste good if it gets cold. With that, Yang Qin left respectfully, not forgetting to close the door. After she left, Sheng Wanwan raised her chin at Jiang Yuqing. If you still have any doubts, why don't you check that bowl of porridge too? Her words were sarcastic and her gaze was mocking. It was rare for Jiang Yuqing to feel embarrassed. Could it be that he really misunderstood? However, her emotions had been very unstable previously, and after encountering Yang Qin, he couldn't help but worry and think that I was wrong. Jiang Yuqing pressed his fist against his lips and coughed. Don't be angry. It's my fault. Sheng Wanwan didn't say anything and just looked at him. Jiang Yuqing couldn't sit still under this gaze, so he could only say, You haven't rested well recently, so I won't disturb you. Sleep well. I'm here for everything else. Don't worry. Without waiting for Sheng Wanwan's reply, he turned around and left in a hurry. After his figure disappeared from the hall for a long time, Sheng Wanwan snorted softly and stood up to pick up the bowl of porridge. With a gentle stir of the spoon, a trace of blood appeared. She finished the bowl of porridge without changing her expression. After a while, Yang Qin walked back quietly. Seeing that Sheng Wanwan had finished the bowl of porridge, she quickly retracted her gaze. Sheng Wanwan pondered for a moment and said, You can go back today. Yang Qin was a little surprised. Didn't you say that it would take 5 days? You've only stayed in the palace for a day or two, and he's already here with suspicion. It's not appropriate for you to stay any longer. Jiang Yuqing might have believed her today, but he had always been a suspicious person. It was very likely that he would continue to investigate. Yang Qin hesitated for a moment. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 570. In the Chongshu Pavilion. Chu Luiwei and the others came to the herb garden together. Yuchi Song stood outside the door and set up a huge barrier that enveloped the entire herb garden. With me here, no one will disturb you. Yuchi Song said with a hint of worry in her eyes. Chu Luiwei nodded. Thank you, master. Then, she entered the herb garden. Chang Wanzhou followed closely behind. Chu Luiwei turned around and looked at him in surprise. Chang Wanzhou said, I said before that I would help you guard. Chu Luiwei raised her chin. You can also stay outside the barrier. Isn't master right there? Chang Wanzhou said stubbornly, I'll be closer to you. If anything goes wrong, I can help you immediately. As if he was worried that Chu Luiwei would not agree, he quickly added another sentence. After all, No one here knows the Majesty on gravel better than I do. Chu Luiyue looked at his determined face and smiled. The two of them came to the middle of the herb garden. Chu Luiyue and Chang Wanzhou looked at each other. Chang Wanzhou nodded slightly. Chu Luiyue took a deep breath, took out a dagger, and gently cut her left palm. Immediately, a bloody wound appeared. Dark red blood immediately gushed out of the wound. Chu Luiyue sat cross-legged with her palms facing down and placed them on the ground. A thick bead of blood silently gushed out and quickly soaked into the ochre-red ground. A moment later, the dried-up herbs in the surroundings suddenly began to move. The nearest suchi plums suddenly shattered from the roots. The Majesty on gravel flowed out of it and headed toward Chu Luiyue. Soon, the second, the third, with Chu Luiyue as the center, countless abandoned herbs in the surroundings shattered silently. The Majesty on gravel mixed in them also began to rush toward Chu Luiyue. It was like countless blood-colored hair fluttering in the wind, but also like fine sand flowing over. Although there was very little Majesty on gravel in each plant, when they all gathered together, it quickly became a spectacular sight. After about 15 minutes, the ground around Chu Luiyue seemed to have countless red rivers. And their destination was Chu Luiyue. It was as if there was an invisible hand controlling all of this. As time passed, Chu Luiyue could clearly feel the blood in her body was quickly flowing out of the wound on her palm. She lowered her eyes to take a look. The ground under her palm was gradually dyed red, and it was slowly spreading to the surroundings. At the same time, the force in her body was being consumed faster than her blood. Chu Luiyue's expression. No wonder Chang Wanzhou was so determined to oppose it. The Majesty on gravel's consumption of force was indeed too terrifying. She had just cleared a distance of 20 steps around her when she already felt the force in her body begin to be consumed at an abnormal speed. But this herb garden was extremely large. More importantly, the Majesty on gravel was very likely to have spread to the entire Qingyuan mountain. How much force would be consumed? Even she was a little uncertain now. But fortunately, there was no movement from the water droplet at this time. Thinking of it, Chu Luiyue felt more confident in her heart. She held her breath and focused, methodically circulating the force in her body. The Majesty on gravel further away also began to surge toward this side. Chang Wanzhou stood at the side and watched closely, not daring to slack off. So far, everything was going smoothly, but this was only the beginning. Tianling Palace. After Jiang Yuqing left Huayang Palace, he wanted to leave the palace directly, but halfway there, he turned around and went to Qingfeng Palace. Qingfeng Palace was still heavily guarded. Ordinary people could not easily approach this place, but Jiang Yuqing was different. For various reasons, he could basically enter and leave freely. When they saw Jiang Yuqing, the palace servants in charge of guarding the place were a little puzzled. Didn't this person just come a few days ago? Why was he here again? Although he used to come here often in the past, he had been coming here more frequently recently. But they definitely did not dare to say such a thing, and did not even reveal a trace of a strange expression. Those who could stay here were all carefully selected people, and would not make such a mistake. Jiang Yuqing was about to enter when he saw a manservant standing outside the door with his hands by his side, as if waiting for someone. This manservant looked somewhat familiar. He walked over and recognized that this was the imperial physician Zhuo Mingxi's man. Shengguan had chosen 3 imperial physicians to take turns looking after the emperor. Calculating the time, today was indeed the day that Zhuo Mingxi should be here. When the manservant saw Jiang Yuqing, he immediately bowed. Jiang Yuqing asked, "Is Lord Zhuo inside?" The manservant replied respectfully, "Yes." "How long has it been?" "A quarter of an hour." Jiang Yuqing nodded. According to the time, he should be coming out soon. He thought for a moment and gave up on the idea of going in. Instead, he stood where he was and waited with the manservant. The manservant did not dare to ask anything, and could only carefully accompany them. Soon, a middle-aged man walked out of the room. It was Zhuo Mingxi. Jiang Yuqing took a few steps forward. "Lord Zhuo." When he saw Jiang Yuqing, Zhuo Mingxi was shocked. "Eldest young Master Jiang, why are you here?" Jiang Yuqing smiled. "The third princess hasn't been resting well recently, so I came to visit her. I didn't know how His Majesty was doing, so I came to take a look. Zhuo Mingxi nodded in understanding, stroked his beard, and looked relieved. You really care about His Majesty. Jiang Yuqing glanced at the closed door. Lord Zhuo, does His Majesty show any signs of waking up? Zhuo Mingxi shook his head with a worried expression. A trace of disappointment flashed through Jiang Yuqing's eyes. Why hasn't he gotten better yet? They had stopped taking the medicine long ago, and had been nursing His Majesty's body. Logically speaking, His Majesty should be able to wake up. But until now, there was still no sign of him waking up. Zhuo Mingxi said, we can understand eldest young Master Jiang's worries. But this kind of thing, sometimes it's hard to say. Maybe His Majesty will wake up tomorrow. Don't worry too much. Jiang Yuqing could only nod. Sorry to trouble you, Lord Zhuo. This is our duty. How can it be troublesome? In any case, we will do our best to make His Majesty wake up as soon as possible. If eldest young Master Jiang has nothing else to say, I'll go back first to prepare the medicine for His Majesty. Lord Zhuo, please. Jiang Yuqing took half a step back. Zhuo Mingxi cupped his hands and left with the manservant. However, just as he took 2 steps, Jiang Yuqing suddenly stopped him. Lord Zhuo, please wait. Zhuo Mingxi stood still and looked back at him. Eldest young Master Jiang, is there anything else? Jiang Yuqing's gaze fell on Zhuo Mingxi's belt, and a trace of doubt arose in his heart. When imperial doctors entered the palace, they had to hang their jade pendants on their belts. But Zhuo Mingxi didn't have one on him. Lord Zhuo, where's your jade pendant? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from love. Chapter 571. Zhuo Mingxi followed Jiang Yuqing's gaze and glanced at himself. Oh, you're talking about that. I don't know where I lost it and couldn't find it. In 2 days, the new one should be ready and sent over. Jiang Yuqing nodded in understanding. I see. Zhuo Mingxi looked at him and asked tentatively. I know that imperial physicians should wear the jade pendant when they enter the palace. His Majesty's treatment can't be delayed. I thought about it and decided to come. Jiang Yuqing smiled. Don't think too much, Lord Zhuo. I don't mean to blame you. I just happened to see it and was curious. You're right. His Majesty's health is the most important thing. Besides, since the new one is almost ready, there's no need to pursue this matter. Zhuo Mingxi breathed a sigh of relief. However, this is a symbol of status after all. Lord Zhuo should be careful in the future. Of course, of course. The two exchanged a few more words before Zhuo Mingxi finally left. Jiang Yuqing turned around to take a look before turning around to leave. Chongshu Pavilion. Chu Luiyue was still sitting in the same place. A lot of messed yuan gravel had gathered around her palm. Her lips were a little pale, but fortunately she was still in good spirits. 1/3 of the messed yuan gravel in the herb garden had been gathered. The messed yuan gravel, which was as small as dust, had gradually condensed into a larger gravel. However, when they were deposited together, they were still like liquid and could flow freely back and forth. The force in Chu Luiyue's limbs and bones was almost exhausted. With a thought, a vigorous force surged out of the water droplet. The feeling of exhaustion disappeared instantly. Chu Luiyue was refreshed and sped up. Chang Wanzhou watched nervously from the side, his thin lips tightly pursed. Yuqi Song, who was standing outside, watched this scene with his heart in his mouth. Gradually, more and more messed yuan gravel gathered around Chu Luiyue's palm. When night fell, Chu Luiyue finally gathered all the mixed yuan gravel in the herb garden. She adjusted her breathing and looked up at Yuqi Song. Master, I'm afraid you'll have to remove this barrier first. Otherwise, it would affect her ability to gather the chaos yuan gravel outside. Yuqi Song was worried, but he still nodded and agreed. All right. With that, he waved his sleeve, and the barrier dissipated. This time, Chu Luiyue was no longer under any protection. Other than Chang Wanzhou, who was standing nearby, Yuqi Song was already standing outside. Chu Luiyue closed his eyes and held his breath. Force continuously gushed out from the water droplet. In the darkness of the night, nothing could be seen clearly. Only the faint rustling sound could be heard coming from all directions. The closer they got to Chu Luiyue, the clearer the sound became. There was no need to look to know that it was the messed yuan gravel that had spread throughout the entire Qingyuan mountain. Hearing this sound, Yu Qisong's hair stood on end. How much was there? The entire Qingyuan mountain might have been completely covered by this messed yuan gravel. If it weren't for Chu Luiyue today, they could only let the messed yuan gravel continue to spread. It wouldn't be long before this mountain would become a wasteland. Thinking of this, Yu Qisong's heart was filled with lingering fear. If it was really Jiang Yuqing who did it, why did he do it? The night passed in a hurry. Yu Qisong and Chang Wanzhou stood guard for the entire night. When the morning sun shone down, the endless rustling sound finally dissipated. The two of them stared at Chu Luiyue. Even though Wei Qisong had mentally prepared himself for this, he was still shocked when he saw this scene with his own eyes. The messed yuan gravel around Chu Luiyue seemed to be wrapped in a layer of transparent film. It almost became a small stream, floating around Chu Luiyue and flowing quietly. The aura contained in it was extremely powerful. It was almost daunting. Chu Luiyue's face was extremely pale, and her eyes were bloodshot. Fortunately, the aura around her was still stable. She exhaled softly and looked at the messed yuan gravel flowing around her. Suddenly, a small piece of ice crystal slowly condensed on it. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat. It was starting to condense. The messed yuan gravel on Qingyuan Mountain had all been gathered. Chang Wanzhou also noticed this scene and immediately said, "It's fine. It's coming." Chu Luiyue raised her hand. A vigorous origin power crazily gushed out from her body. It instantly surrounded the messed yuan gravel. Then, the messed yuan gravel began to condense at a speed visible to the naked eye. In the blink of an eye, it had completely formed a large piece of red ice crystal. Just as Chu Luiyue was about to destroy it, the red ice crystal suddenly began to shrink. Chu Luiyue frowned and quickly glanced at Chang Wanzhou. What's going on? Chang Wanzhou also had a grave expression. It shouldn't be like this. Your power is compressing it. What? Chu Luiyue was confused. She didn't do anything. According to what Chang Wanzhou said before, after the messed yuan gravel began to condense, she just needed to quickly destroy it. She had done exactly as he had told her to. But before she could do anything, this thing had. Before Chu Luiyue could react, Chang Wanzhou had already rushed over and punched out. It seemed that he was going to attack directly. Chu Luiyue suddenly had an idea. Wait. Chang Wanzhou stopped abruptly. What's wrong? This thing is very dangerous. If we don't deal with it as soon as possible, wait. Chu Luiyue seemed to have noticed something. She shook her head and signaled Chang Wanzhou to step back. Yu Qisong, who was standing outside, also felt that something was wrong. He asked worriedly, "What's going on? What's going on?" Chang Wanzhou frowned and shook his head. Chu Luiyue gave him a look that said, "Don't be impatient." The few of them fell silent. Only their eyes were fixed on the red ice crystal that was still shrinking. When it had shrunk to the size of a palm, it finally stopped. The color was rich, smooth, and bright, like a ruby. It quietly floated in front of Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue hesitantly reached out and took the red ice crystal in her hand. It was cold to the touch, but she could faintly feel the surging energy within it. The next moment, the red ice crystal suddenly entered her body through the wound on her palm. Yu Qisong and Chang Wanzhou's hearts skipped a beat when they saw this scene. Chu Luiyue was suddenly stunned. Because the ice crystal seemed to have melted after coming into contact with her blood. It followed her yuan meridian and spread all the way to Dantian. The water droplet quietly floated in the air. The next moment, the red ice crystal was completely swallowed by it. A gentle energy slowly flowed out of it and nourished Chu Luiyue's limbs and bones. Chu Luiyue was dumbfounded. After a while, she suddenly thought of something and asked the water droplet in disbelief. You deliberately swallowed the energy in the messed yuan gravel? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from LoveNet. Chapter 572. The water droplet floated quietly and rippled slightly. This was a definite answer. Chu Luiwei was stunned for a while before she finally reacted. It was actually like this. The power in the water droplet was constantly gushing out. After the messed yuan gravel condensed, it chose to counterattack. In this way, not only could it recover the energy that was previously consumed, but it could also devour the power that was originally in the messed yuan gravel. Chu Luiwei was silent for a while before she said with difficulty, "You really refuse to take any loss, Luyu?" Luyu. Yuchi Song saw that Chu Luiwei did not react and could not help but ask nervously. Chu Luiwei came back to her senses and opened her eyes. Chang Wanzhou and Yuchi Song both stood in front of her with worried faces. "How are you?" Yuchi Song asked while carefully sizing her up, afraid that something would happen to her. Although Chang Wanzhou did not speak, his eyes were still fixed on Chu Luiwei. He did not know what happened to the messed yuan gravel in the end. He had never encountered such a situation when he was in Nanjiang. If Chu Luiwei really met with an accident because of this, he would never forgive himself. "I'm fine," Chu Luiwei hurriedly said. As she spoke, she stood up and glanced at her palm. The wound that was previously dripping with blood had already scabbed over. "Master Little Zhou, don't worry. Am I not fine?" As Chu Luiwei spoke, she spread out her hands and let the two of them look at her. What exactly happened just now? Yuchi Song did not dare to relax. "That thing, how did that thing enter your body?" He turned his head and glanced at Chang Wanzhou. "Wanzhou, you said that this thing is not poisonous to people, but it can quickly consume the force in a person's body. Now that it is in Lu Yu's body, what should we do?" Seeing Yuchi Song, who had always been calm and composed, reveal such a panicked and helpless expression, Chu Luiwei felt both sour and warm in his heart. She grabbed Yuchi Song's arm. "Master, I'm really fine. If you don't believe me, you can check his pulse yourself." Yuchi Song put her hand on her wrist suspiciously. Suddenly, his expression froze. Then, he looked at Chu Luiwei with uncertainty, his eyes full of shock and suspicion. This lass. She had used up so much origin power just now. Why did it seem like her strength had increased? Chu Luiwei looked at him with a smile. "How is it? Can you rest assured now?" Yuchi Song checked her again and found that there was indeed nothing wrong with her body. Moreover, her body was full of force. He slowly loosened his grip and muttered, "Indeed." Chu Luiwei looked at Chang Wanzhou. "Little Zhou, you can rest assured now, right?" Although Chang Wanzhou was not a celestial physician, he had extremely sharp five senses. Not only did Chu Luiwei not have the strange aura of the messed yuan gravel, but the pressure around her had become stronger. Yuchi Song couldn't help but ask, What's going on?" Chu Luiwei had a headache. How should she explain this to them? Could it be that not only was she not injured at all, but she had also absorbed all the power of the messed yuan gravel? Speaking of which, I'm actually not too sure. Chu Luiwei's explanation was rather vague. Wei Qi Song, however, seemed to have understood something. Could it be that the power in your body has dissolved it? Chu Luiwei nodded thoughtfully. Probably. Maybe that's the case. In fact, there was nothing wrong with saying that. The ice crystal of the messed yuan gravel had indeed been dissolved. It was just that the power in it had become hers. Chang Wanzhou suddenly said, "Now, even if we don't look at Jiang Yuqing's palm, we might be able to determine if it was him who did it." Chu Luiwei was stunned. But Chang Wanzhou's expression was indifferent. Because after you resolved the messed yuan gravel, the power he had obtained from the messed yuan gravel will begin to backfire. If it's light, his realm will regress. If it's heavy, his yuan meridian will be damaged. Digression. Starting from the early morning of the 10th, I will update my mobile phone users. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 573. Chu Luiwei's expressions suddenly became very subtle. Realm regression, yuan meridian damage. That sounds pretty good. Are you sure? The corners of Chu Luiwei's mouth curled up as she asked excitedly. Chang Wanzhou frowned in confusion. Why does it seem like Chu Luiwei is very happy? Looking at her pair of eyes that were as bright as the stars and her slightly curled lips, Chang Wanzhou's mood seemed to relax a lot. He nodded slightly. As long as he was the one who did it back then, it will definitely be like this. Chu Liwei had a voice in her heart shouting, "Delightful." She had never wished for the mastermind to be Jiang Yuqing as much as she did at this moment. Although she couldn't confront Jiang Yuqing directly now, it would be good if she could take this opportunity to teach him a small lesson. Seeing Chu Liu's reaction, Yuqi Song didn't think too much about it. He only thought that she was excited because she could find out the truth. If that's the case, then it's much easier, Yuqi Song said thoughtfully. Jiang Yuqing's status was noble. Now, many things in the Tianling dynasty were done by him for Shangguan. It wasn't difficult to meet him and test his strength. Today, I will personally go down the mountain and make a trip to the Jiang residence. You will know the result at a glance. Chu Liwei was a little surprised. You're going today? Yuqi Song said, that's right. Anyway, now that things have developed to this point, if it really has something to do with him, he must already know. There's no point in delaying it any longer. It's better to go directly. Chu Liwei pondered for a moment and felt that it made sense. Yuqi Song was planning to face the attack head-on. In any case, the Chongshu Pavilion was the victim. Now that this matter was investigated, the ones who should be worried were those who had done something wrong. After saying that, Yuqi Song was about to leave. Chu Liwei hastily shouted, "Master, you forgot one thing." What? Chu Liwei blinked. This medicinal garden has already returned to normal. Can you let the senior brothers and sisters take care of this place again? Look at me. I almost forgot such an important thing. Yuqi Song laughed. Good. I will order all the disciples in the pavilion to come together. Although it would take a long time for the herbs to grow, it was a promising start for Chongshu Pavilion. Now that the problem of the Mestyuan gravel had been solved and Qingyuan Mountain had returned to normal, they no longer had to worry about not being able to raise the medicinal herbs like before. That was the most important thing. The previously abandoned herb garden was officially reopened, and new herbs were being planted. This news seemed to have grown wings and quickly spread among all the disciples. At first, everyone was very confused, but when they heard the pavilion master say that the herb garden had been restored and the herbs planted could be successfully raised, everyone was eager to give it a try. In the afternoon, almost all kinds of herbs had been replanted in the entire herb garden. Although it was still bare at a glance, the pavilion master's words gave them a glimmer of hope. Chu Liwei also planted some, and under Yuqi Song's insistence, she was given the power to manage the herb garden. Chu Liwei refused at first, but she couldn't resist Yuqi Song's insistence and finally agreed. On one hand, she really liked to take care of herbs. On the other hand, Yuqi Song promised that she could use the herbs in the herb garden in the future. Chu Liwei was quite tempted, so she agreed. In fact, when the person in charge of the herb garden was decided at the beginning, many disciples competed fiercely. When Yuqi Song said that she chose Chu Liwei, she thought that everyone would question her ability and qualifications. She didn't expect everyone's attitude to be surprisingly consistent. Since little junior sister wanted to do it, then do it. In the entire Chongshu Pavilion, was there anyone more suitable than little junior sister? Everyone expressed their strong agreement and started to get close to Chu Liwei and Chang Wanzhou. It was understandable that they were looking for Chu Liwei, but when she saw everyone bracing themselves to talk to the cold Chang Wanzhou, Chu Liwei was really confused. After asking, she found out that Lu Xiao had already told her senior brothers and sisters a truth the day before. Although little junior brother was cold, he listened to little junior sister. Moreover, little junior sister treated little junior brother very well. In that case, it would be good to have a good relationship with either of them. Hence, when everyone finally came to greet them again, Chu Liwei and Chang Wanzhou's rooms were filled with all kinds of gifts. Chu Liwei looked at the room full of things and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The herbs had only been planted for a few hours, and they were already so enthusiastic. It was obviously a little too early. They clearly wanted to use the excuse of the herb garden to visit her and Chang Wanzhou and give them some gifts. There were very few people in the Chongshu Pavilion now. Those who could stay were all people who had deep feelings for the Chongshu Pavilion. These people had supported each other until now, so the friendship between them was naturally much deeper and more sincere than that between disciples of ordinary sections. Similarly, Chu Luiyue and Chang Wanzhou chose to enter the Chongshu Pavilion at this time. Although they didn't say anything, they were very happy and touched in their hearts. Their attitude towards the two of them was naturally exceptionally doting, afraid that they would suffer even the slightest bit of grievance. Chu Luiyue leaned against the door frame and recalled the scene just now. The corners of her mouth unconsciously curled up. She wasn't a person who liked excitement. However, the room just now was extremely noisy, and she felt very happy. A long time ago, her status was revered and high above. Everyone respected her, worshipped her, envied her. She had never experienced such an experience. After that, she was reborn with great difficulty. She was lowly and insignificant, and it was difficult for her to move forward. Everyone bullied her, humiliated her, despised her, and mocked her. She had never experienced such an experience. Originally, she chose the Chongshu Pavilion largely because of Yuchi-song. But now, she began to feel grateful for her choice. Chang Wanzhou straightened up from the small mountain of gifts. A small doll that Yi Ranran had given him was hanging on his body. Chu Luiyue smiled and said, "Little Zhou, don't be in a hurry. Take your time." Chang Wanzhou's face darkened. Chu Luiyue walked to the side and spread out a piece of rice paper. "This is the first gift that senior brother and senior sister gave us for our first meeting. It represents their feelings. So we must keep it well. Tidy them up one by one. I'll register them." As she spoke, she glanced at Chang Wanzhou and wrote, "Yi Ranran 1 doll." In fact, Yi Ranran had made 2 dolls, one for each of them. Chang Wanzhou's face darkened even more. He was about to pull the doll off, but when he touched the soft fabric and fine stitches, he paused, unhooked it, and removed it. Chu Luiyue narrowed her eyes in satisfaction. This child clearly likes it too. Why is he always so cold? She smiled at Chang Wanzhou and said, "Little Zhou, after you finish writing the list, you have to keep it well. Take it out and take a look at it in the future. Remember to return the gift to senior brother and senior sister." Chang Wanzhou looked away. "You don't have to give it to me. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network." Chapter 574. Chu Luiyue was stunned for a moment before she understood. Chang Wanzhou said that he couldn't read, so he naturally couldn't understand this list. She was so focused on teasing him that she actually forgot about this matter. Chang Wanzhou turned his face sideways. His soft golden short hair covered his eyes. Chu Luiyue could only see his clear and smooth jawline, as well as his straight nose and slightly pursed thin lips. Actually, he still cared, didn't he? Chu Luiyue's heart felt as if it had been pricked by a sharp needle. She opened her mouth, but her throat seemed to be blocked by something, and she couldn't say a word. How familiar was it? Wasn't Mu Qinghe the same back then? So, she taught him how to read, she taught him how to cultivate, she taught him how to speak and do things. Mu Qinghe was very smart. He learned everything very quickly and did it very well. That was why he could grow so quickly and become an important figure in the Tianling dynasty in just 10 years. With a stomp of his foot, the entire Dehuang swamp would shake. What happened later? There was no later. Hearing that Chu Luiyue didn't speak for a while, Chang Wanzhou turned to look at her, only to see that she was looking at him with a dazed expression. No, she wasn't looking at him. Chang Wanzhou frowned and walked over. "What's wrong with you?" Chu Luiyue suddenly came back to her senses. "Nothing." Chang Wanzhou looked into her eyes seriously. "You're very sad." Chu Luiyue sighed softly in her heart. Sometimes she really felt that Chang Wanzhou was too smart. Chang Wanzhou paused for a moment and said, "I'll keep the list well." Chu Luiyue was stunned for a moment. Did he think that this would make her feel less sad? Something in her heart seemed to slowly melt. She said, "I'll teach you." Chang Wanzhou was stunned. "What?" Chu Luiyue wrote a line of words on the xian paper. Chang Wanzhou suddenly understood. His lips were tightly pursed, and no one knew what he was thinking. Chu Luiyue ruffled his hair. "I didn't teach you for nothing. After that, you'll have to help me out. Consider it your tuition fee." Chang Wanzhou nodded seriously. All right. The Jiang mansion. Jiang Yuqing lay on the ground in pain. Large beads of sweat fell from his forehead, and his face was as pale as paper. The origin power in his body suddenly split into two and began to fight fiercely. His entire body was in incomparable pain. He almost fainted. He clenched his teeth, afraid that he would make any noise and attract the attention of those outside. He endured the pain as he looked at his palm. An extremely thin line of blood extended from the center of his palm to his wrist. However, at this moment, it was rapidly dispersing from the wrist. Jiang Yuqing looked horrified. How could this be? How could this be? Wasn't everything fine before? Could it be that the people at the Chongshu Pavilion discovered something? He desperately pressed down on the line of blood, trying to stop it from dispersing. However, it was all in vain. As the line of blood slowly disappeared, the origin power in his body also quickly dissipated in all directions. It was so fast that it was like a snowy mountain collapsing. He tried to suppress it with another force, but found that it was useless. Instead, it sped up the loss of origin power in his body. No, a trace of deep fear flashed in Jiang Yuqing's eyes. It was not easy for him to cultivate and break through to his current realm. How could he watch this power leave him? Something must have happened to the messed yuan gravel. However, that thing was only available in Nanjiang. Very few people in West Hill knew about it, let alone deal with it. Who was it that made a move? Jiang Yuqing stood up with difficulty. However, just as he took 2 steps, he uncontrollably bumped into the table beside him. The porcelain on the table fell to the ground with a crisp sound. Eldest young master? What's wrong? A servant's voice came from outside. The door moved as if someone was about to come in. No one is allowed to come in. Jiang Yuqing shouted sternly. The person outside was also shocked and hurriedly retreated. Yes. Jiang Yuqing took a deep breath. He supported himself on the table with difficulty and sat down on the chair beside him. His internal organs felt as if countless knives were madly slicing them. The suffocating pain came from all over his body. Because of the pain, Jiang Yuqing bent over and supported himself on the table with one hand. The veins on the back of his hand were bulging. After a while, the pain did not lessen at all. Instead, it became even more intense. However, what worried Jiang Yuqing even more was that his origin power was depleting too quickly. He was almost about to fall out of his current realm. He looked down at his wrist and saw that more than half of the red line on it had already faded. If this continued, the consequences would be unimaginable. The two forces fought wildly in his body. Jiang Yuqing was inevitably greatly affected. Soon, a thick smell of blood surged. Splurt. He finally couldn't take it anymore and spat out a mouthful of blood. At the same time, his realm finally fell out of the middle stage of the 8th stage. He returned to the early stage of the 8th stage. Then, his body fell heavily to the ground with a dull thud. However, how could Jiang Yuqing care about all this at this time? There was only one thought in his mind. His realm had regressed. One had to know that at this level, even if it was just a difference of 1 stage, there would be a huge change in strength. He had spent a year's time to raise his cultivation base, and now, it was all in vain. Moreover, for a cultivator, the loss of strength was definitely not only limited to the loss of strength. Whether it was the loss of the Yuan meridian or the impact on one's state of mind, it was immeasurable. He didn't know how long it would take for him to recover from this setback. It was even possible that he would never be able to improve again. The servant outside heard the commotion in the room. Although he was worried, he remembered Jiang Yuqing's previous order. He didn't dare to go forward and could only wait anxiously on the spot. Both inside and outside the room were silent. Jiang Yuqing sat on the ground in a daze. He could only hear the sound of his breathing and the sound of his heart beating violently. The two forces surged back and forth in his Yuan meridian as if they were about to burst out. After a long time, he seemed to have gotten used to the intense pain. However, he soon realized that it wasn't that he was numb, but that the pain in his body was really weakening. However, there was no relief on his face. Instead, he slowly lowered his head and looked at his palm as if he had expected something. That red line had already completely shattered. Only a broken wound was left, indicating what had just happened. If he didn't stop now, he was afraid that he would fall out of the 8th stage. Jianghu felt a lingering fear in his heart. For a moment, he didn't know how to react. Everything happened too suddenly. His mind was blank. After an unknown period of time, he finally woke up when the blood on his body gradually dried up. This matter definitely didn't happen by chance. Tuk tuk. Eldest young master, the pavilion master of the Chongshu Pavilion is here to visit. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 575. A sharp glint flashed across Jianghu eyes. He actually came so quickly. In that case, Yuchi Song must have already known something and deliberately came to verify it. If he went out now and Yuchi Song saw his current appearance, everything would be irrefutable. Hearing no movement, the servant asked again, "Eldest young master?" Jianghu struggled to get up. In fact, the terrifying pain had already dissipated. Because his realm had already fallen, and that red line. He looked down at his wrist. The wound that appeared because the bloodline was broken was not deep, but it was clearly visible. Since Yuchi Song had already come to the Jiang mansion, then it was very likely that he already knew about this bloodline. He had to find a way to cover it up. Invite Pavilion Master Yuchi to the study room first. This young master will go in a moment. He took a deep breath and tried to make his voice sound calm and normal. Hearing the hurried footsteps outside, Jianghu held his forehead with one hand and thought hard. Yuchi Song came prepared. It was not that easy to deceive him. Yuchi Song was originally following the servant to the study room, but on the way, he met Jiang Lizhua, who just happened to return. Seeing Yuchi Song appear in the Jiang mansion, Jiang Lizhua was very surprised. They had never had much contact with the Chongshu Pavilion. Moreover, in Shilin City, basically no one wanted to take the initiative to interact with the Chongshu Pavilion. However, Jiang Lizhua's face was still very good. He personally received Yuchi Song. After the two of them sat down in the study room, Jiang Lizhua asked Yuchi Song's purpose in coming to the Jiang mansion. When he heard that Yuchi Song had specially come to find Jianghu, he felt even more strange. However, seeing that Yuchi Song did not seem to have any intention of letting go, he tactfully did not ask any more questions and only chatted about something else. I heard that Chongshu Pavilion has recently accepted 2 extremely outstanding disciples. I haven't had the time to congratulate Pavilion Master Yuchi. Jiang Lizhua smiled very politely. He had more or less heard about what happened at the Wanzheng meet. Many people didn't understand why Chu Luiyue and the other man chose the Chongshu Pavilion. He was just as curious. It was unknown if Yuchi Song had done something in private, or if it was something else. Hearing him mention Chu Luiyue, the smile on Yuchi Song's face became much more genuine. It is indeed Chongshu Pavilion's fortune to have the two of them. If not for the two of them, the Chaos Yuan gravel on Qingyuan Mountain would still be spreading everywhere. Looking at Yuchi Song's happy and proud appearance, Jiang Lizhua raised his eyebrows slightly. Actually, he was just casually saying that. At the end of the day, they were just 2 half-grown children. How much trouble could they cause? Moreover, he had heard that the two of them did not have a good background. Even if he had outstanding talent, he might not be able to become a top expert in the future. Yuchi Song, on the other hand, had been in low spirits for more than a year. It had been a long time since he showed such an expression. Could it be that he was really happy? Thinking about it carefully, it was actually understandable. It was indeed quite rare for the Chongshu Pavilion to be able to accept new disciples. It was no wonder that Yuchi Song was like this. Jiang Lizhua was mocking him in his heart, but he still revealed a look of admiration on his face. To be able to make Pavilion Master Yuchi praise him like this, he must be a dragon among men. If there's a chance in the future, you must meet him. Wei Qi Song glanced at him meaningfully and smiled as well. Definitely. Of course, he could tell that Jiang Lizhua looked down on their Chongshu Pavilion and everyone in the Chongshu Pavilion. Over the past year or so, he had seen too many such gazes and expressions. If it was in the past, he would more or less feel a little uncomfortable every time he met them. Therefore, he gradually didn't interact much with the crowd. But it was different now. No matter what these outsiders thought, he didn't care at all. When they really see the strength of Lu Yu and Wanzhou in the future, he was also looking forward to it. The two of them chatted for quite a long time, beating around the bush. Yuchi Song gradually became impatient, but the suspicion in his heart became more and more certain. Jiang Yuqing stayed in his residence, but he actually took so long to come out to meet people. No one would believe that there was no ghost. After a while, a voice finally came from outside the door. "Greetings, eldest young master." Yuchi Song looked at the door. After Chu Luiwei arranged all the gifts, she rushed back to Changwanzhou and cultivated in her room in peace. After the water droplet in her dantian swallowed the Mestuan gravel, the aura in her body seemed to have strengthened a lot. She guided this power and circulated it in her body, but she didn't try to continue breaking through. In the eyes of ordinary people, although the speed of her advancement was a little fast, it was actually considered normal. After all, she had the Daijing Yuan meridian. However, Chu Liwei knew very well that her pill of essence was different from others. The speed of this breakthrough was really a little fast. "Girl is quite cautious." Taizu's voice suddenly sounded, and there was a hint of admiration in his tone. After this period of time, he could already confirm that Chu Luiwei had more potential than he had imagined. What was even rarer was that she had an extremely tenacious will and strong control. In the face of the temptation of a breakthrough, not many people in this world could resist it. However, Chu Luiwei did very well. This breadth of mind and vision was indeed extraordinary. Chu Luiwei's lips curved slightly. Taizu didn't know her situation, but he could barely sense the surging power around her. However, he could guess a lot based on this. After all, he was Taizu, so Chu Luiwei didn't want to deliberately hide it. "Thank you, Taizu." Compared to the breakthrough of the realm, she wanted to try to cultivate the Jingshan palm more now. However, just as she adjusted her breath, she heard Lu Jiao's voice coming from outside. "Little junior sister. Someone is looking for you. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network." Chapter 576. It was almost evening. Who would come to look for her at this time? Chu Luiwei got up and went to open the door. She saw Lu Jiao standing at the door. "Senior brother Lu, who's looking for me?" They had just met in the afternoon, so they shouldn't be here now. Lu Jiao's expression was a little strange. "It's a man from outside. He said he was looking for you, so I told him to wait at the foot of the mountain." Chongshu Pavilion was currently heavily guarded. Although there were no restrictions on the entry and exit of the disciples, they were still very strict with outsiders. A man? Chu Luiwei quickly thought about it. She had just arrived at West Hill not long ago. Other than the group of people at Chongshu Pavilion, she didn't have much contact with anyone else. It shouldn't be Jian Fengqi or Mu Qinghe. These two people were too famous in West Hill. Lu Jiao had seen them before. Could it be that one of them had sent someone? Did he say who he was? Lu Jiao nodded. "He said his name is Yan Qing and that he came specially to see you." Chu Luiwei was shocked. "Yan Qing? Why is he here? Shouldn't he be accompanying Rong Xiu at Mingyue Tianshan?" Seeing the slight change in Chu Luiwei's expression, Lu Jiao asked tentatively, "Junior sister, do you know this person?" Chu Luiwei nodded. He's a friend of mine. Please invite him up, senior brother." If there was nothing urgent, he definitely wouldn't have come all the way here. Could it be that something had happened to Rong Xiu? Chu Luiwei's heart skipped a beat. Lu Jiao saw the urgency and worry in her eyes and couldn't help but think more. That Yan Qing looked like a talent. Could it be that he had a close relationship with junior sister? If that was the case, they had to help junior sister investigate properly. Thinking of this, Lu Jiao suddenly felt a heavy responsibility on his shoulders. "Junior sister, wait a moment. I'll bring him up." After saying that, he quickly left. Chu Luiyue stared blankly at his rapidly disappearing figure. She didn't know if it was an illusion, but why did she feel that? Lu Zhiyao suddenly seemed to want to see Yanqing. Lu Yu, I heard that someone came to the mountain to look for you? Just as Chu Luiyue was thinking about this, he saw Yi Ranran suddenly appear from the side with a curious look on his face. Seeing Chu Luiyue's suspicious gaze, Yi Ranran hurriedly explained. It wasn't Lu Zhiyao who told me. I accidentally overheard it. Besides, the other senior brothers and sisters don't know about it either. Chu Luiyue. Where are my senior brothers and sisters now? Yi Ranran suddenly blushed and did not say anything. Yi Ranran took 2 steps forward and looked at Chu Luiyue cautiously. Mountain Pass. Chu Luiyue's brows twitched. Mountain Pass? Isn't that the location of the mountain gate? When Yanqing comes up the stairs, she will be able to see him at a glance. Chu Luiyue recalled the scene of her first day at the Chongshu Pavilion. After climbing countless stairs, as soon as she reached the peak, several enthusiastic faces appeared in front of her. Chu Luiyue. She really suspected that a large part of the reason why the Chongshu Pavilion had fallen to this point was because the disciples of the pavilion were too gossipy. If they didn't cultivate properly, how could they become strong? Yi Ranran quickly explained. Actually, we didn't mean to intentionally do that. Well, actually, we didn't do it on purpose. It's just that when Lu Zhiyao came up, he happened to meet 2 senior sisters who had just returned halfway up the mountain, so he told them. Then, after climbing half the mountain, everyone knew about it? That's right. Yi Ranran responded softly. Although she came earlier than Chu Luiyue and could be considered Chu Luiyue's senior sister, Chu Luiyue always seemed to have a noble and powerful aura. In addition, Chu Luiyue had taken the initiative to stand up for her previously, so it was very difficult for her to put on the airs of a senior sister in front of Chu Luiyue. At this moment, when Chu Luiyue glanced at her from the corner of her eye, she shrunk her neck timidly and felt inexplicably guilty. Chu Luiyue walked forward. At this moment, Chang Wanzhou heard the commotion and also walked out from next door. He looked at Chu Luiyue with some confusion in his eyes. It seemed that she was quite concerned about this man who suddenly came. Yi Ranran leaned over to Chang Wanzhou and asked softly, Wanzhou, do you know that Yanqing? Chang Wanzhou shook his head. Junior sister is here. Lu Zhiyao's loud voice came from afar. The corners of Chu Luiyue's mouth twitched slightly. Was he afraid that everyone couldn't hear him? She quickened her pace and soon saw her senior brothers and sisters gathered in a group. Chu Luiyue was speechless. Just as she was seriously considering whether she should retreat first, a senior sister happened to turn around and see her. She quickly exclaimed, Junior sister is here too. Everyone fell silent for a moment, then immediately scattered like birds and beasts. Junior sister, we still have something to do, so we'll leave first. Take your time to chat, take your time. Although they said that they were going to leave, their eyes were still looking down the mountain. At this moment, Lu Zhiyao had already arrived. Yanqing was behind him. He was wearing black heavy armor, and there were still some traces of blood on his body. Although he had restrained his aura, there was still a faint murderous aura. It was as if he had just returned from a battlefield. This aura immediately made all the senior brothers and sisters who had yet to leave stop in their tracks. This man wasn't simple at first glance. Why did he come to find junior sister in such a hurry? Chu Luiyue had never seen him like this before. At this moment, she was also shocked. Yanqing? Yanqing had already sensed several auras at the entrance of the mountain before he came up, so he wasn't surprised to see these people at this time. He looked forward and saw Chu Luiyue with a surprised expression. He immediately walked forward and stood in front of Chu Luiyue, then knelt on one knee. Yanqing greets Miss Lu Yu. Everyone looked at each other. Oh, it doesn't seem like what we thought before. Chu Luiyue helped him up and quickly sized him up, frowning slightly. Why are you suddenly here? And dressed like this? Did something happen? Yanqing shook his head. Miss Lu Yu, don't worry. Master is fine. Today, I came to deliver something to you. Actually, he had already arrived at West Hill before, but because he didn't know where Chu Luiyue lived now, he had wasted some time. Later, he thought that since she had already joined the Chongshu Pavilion, then it was very likely that she was at Qingyuan Mountain. He came over to take a look, and sure enough, she was here. Everyone's eyes changed again. Master? His master? Who was he to junior sister? Chu Luiyue felt a little relieved, but she was also very puzzled. What did he ask you to deliver? What was so important that he was in such a hurry that Yan Qing didn't even have time to take off his armor and came all the way here? Yan Qing took out a small jade box and presented it with both hands. Chu Luiyue took it. It was only half the size of a palm. What could be inside? With a click, she opened the jade box. A ring that was emitting a faint glow was lying quietly within. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 577. This is an interspatial ring? Chu Luiyue asked uncertainly. Yan Qing nodded. Chu Luiyue's eyes twitched. Could it be that Yan Qing came here so hard just to give me an interspatial ring? Yan Qing seemed to have seen through her doubts and said respectfully, Miss Luyu, Master ordered me to give this to you in person. Chu Luiyue picked up the interspatial ring. It was simple and elegant. The material was neither stone nor jade, but it glowed faintly and looked clear and moist. It seems to be, for a man? Chu Luiyue looked at the interspatial ring carefully and saw a small character, Xiao, engraved on the inside of the ring. This is Rong Xiao's interspatial ring. Did he say what he wanted you to do with this thing? Chu Luiyue asked. Yan Qing's expression changed slightly as he shook his head. Actually, although he didn't see the handwriting, he could guess Master's plan. But he couldn't say it out. Maybe you will know when you put it on. Chu Luiyue injected the force into the ring and found that the seal on it had been erased. Now that she had made such a move, the interspatial ring had become hers. Obviously, Rong Xiao did it on purpose. But why? Chu Luiyue thought as she injected the force into the ring. Suddenly, her movements paused, and the expression on her face froze for a moment. This interspatial ring was of a very high level. It had the largest storage space that Chu Luiyue had ever seen. Compared with this interspatial ring, her previous one seemed to be small pockets that couldn't be taken out. More importantly, is full of white crystal coins. Because there were so many of them that they almost piled up like a mountain, Chu Luiyue couldn't tell how much they were. In short, there were a lot of them. It was rare for Chu Luiyue to be so slow. There was only one question left in her mind, and it kept circling in her mind. How could Rong Xiao be so rich? Miss Luyu? Yan Qing looked at Chu Luiyue in a daze for a while and finally couldn't help but ask. Chu Luiyue came back to his senses and looked at the interspatial ring in his hand with a complicated expression. She doesn't seem to understand her man at all. Now, she finally understood why Rong Xiao asked Yan Qing to make the trip in person. The Cosmos ring was too precious. Was Rong Xiao worried that she had no money to spend? Other than that, she really couldn't think of a second reason. Miss Luyu, the items have been delivered. If you don't have any other instructions, I will return to report. Yan Qing said. He came in a hurry. If he returned late, he might not be able to see Yumo's miserable state. Chu Luiyue rubbed the interspatial ring in her hand. Something seemed to surge in her heart. Wait a moment. Help me bring a letter back. As Chu Luiyue spoke, she turned around and quickly walked back into the house. Yan Qing followed and waited respectfully outside the door. This time, Lu Jiao and the others didn't follow, but they exchanged glances with each other very frequently. So this Yan Qing isn't little junior sister's sweetheart. His master must be her, right? Isn't little junior sister only 14 years old? Why is she already engaged? I don't know who is so lucky. But speaking of which, when can we meet that person? What if he isn't worthy of little junior sister? Don't you see that Yan Qing is full of murderous aura? He suppressed his realm, but his true strength is probably not weaker than ours. As for his master, isn't he even stronger? I think little junior sister is good at everything. She must have good taste too. Then what about little junior brother? This case, Can't you see that little junior sister is raising little junior brother like a child? Yanqing was waiting patiently outside the door when he suddenly saw a young man walk past him and enter the room. He was slightly stunned and looked up. It was an exceptionally thin young man with soft golden short hair. His skin was so white that it was almost translucent. Although it was only a quick glance, one could still tell that his facial features were exquisite and very beautiful. Although this word wasn't suitable to describe a young man, this was definitely the first thing that came to mind when he saw him. He looked to be in his teens and had a hint of youthfulness. At the same time, he had a hint of wildness. He was like a complicated and simple contradiction. While he was in a daze, he saw that the young man had already walked to Chu Liyue's side and helped her grind the ink. From the beginning to the end, he didn't say a word, and his expression was cold and indifferent. However, his movements were smooth and natural, as if he had done it many times. Chu Liyue looked at Chang Wanzhou in surprise. When did this child become so discerning? Judging from his proficiency, he must have done this many times in the past. She smiled and dipped the brush in the ink. After thinking repeatedly in her heart, she finally put the brush down. Yanqing raised his eyebrows high. What is going on? Didn't Miss Lu Yu come to West Hill with Jian Fengqi previously? Except for Mu Qinghe and Jian Fengqi, she shouldn't be familiar with anyone else. But this young man seems to be very close to her. When did such a person appear beside Miss Lu Yu? Yanqing looked carefully and thought to himself, Yu Ling is becoming more and more unreliable. He didn't even report such a big piece of news. If Master finds out about this later, Yanqing suddenly felt a chill down his spine. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 578. Chu Liyue quickly finished writing the letter and put it in the envelope. She walked out and handed the letter to Yanqing. Yanqing, please help me pass this letter to him. Yanqing took it with both hands and said respectfully, Yes. Don't worry, Miss Lu Yu. I'll definitely bring it to him. Chu Liyue was indeed quite assured of Yanqing. She said, Seeing that you came out in a hurry, I won't delay you any longer. Yanqing cupped his fists and bowed. Take care, Miss Lu Yu. I'll take my leave. With that, he carefully put away the letter and turned to leave. Until his figure disappeared from sight, the mountain peak was still silent for a long time. Chu Liyue's gaze swept across the crowd. Senior brothers and sisters, do you have any other questions? Everyone immediately reacted. No. Little junior sister is busy. We'll take our leave first. With that, they really left quickly and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Chu Liyue. Lu Xiao wanted to ask a few more questions, but he was pulled away by Yi Ranran. Chang Wanzhou glanced at the interspatial ring on Chu Liyue's hand. His eyes darkened, but he didn't say anything. He turned around and returned to his room. Chu Liyue raised her hand. The interspatial ring was a little big for her, so she put it on her thumb. Sunlight shone through her fingers. The interspatial ring seemed to have become clearer and shinier. Suddenly, a faint sound could be heard. Chu Liyue was dazed. The cosmic ring that she was wearing on her other finger suddenly cracked open a little. That was her first interspatial ring. Although its level wasn't high and the space wasn't very big, she was used to wearing it for a long time, so she didn't take it off. She didn't expect it to crack. Chu Liyue took it off and looked at the crack regretfully. But from the looks of it, there was no way to recover. She went back to her room and took out all the things in the interspatial ring. She rearranged them and put them into the interspatial ring given to her by Rong Xiu. Although there were countless white crystal coins in it, there was still a lot of space. It was more than enough to store Chu Liyue's things. Suddenly, the sound of something shattering could be heard again. Chu Liyue looked over. Beside her were a few interspatial rings. He had gotten it from Jian Fengqi. There were 8 of them in total. There was a lot of money in each of them. One of them also had cracks on it. In desperation, Chu Liyue had no choice but to transfer everything into the new interspatial ring. However, as soon as he did that, the third interspatial ring also shattered. Chu Luiyue stared at the crack and finally realized something. He slowly looked at the faintly glowing interspatial ring in his hand. It seemed that it was because of this, as if to prove her conjecture, the rest of the interspatial rings were damaged one after another in a short period of time. In the end, there was not even a complete one left. When Chu Luiyue transferred all the things inside, the interspatial rings directly turned into powder silently. Chu Luiyue looked at the powder on the table and glanced at the interspatial ring in his hand. The corners of his lips curled up slightly. Jiang Mansion. Yuqi Song stared at Jiang Yuqing, who came in. After a moment, he narrowed his eyes. Jiang Yuqing's aura was completely concealed. He seemed to have used a yuan instrument that could hide his realm. In this way, there was no difference at a glance, but others could not detect his true strength. In his heart, Wei Qisong was almost certain that Jiang Yuqing was the one who did it. Father, Pavilion Master Yuqi. Jiang Yuqing walked in with a normal expression and greeted the two of them before sitting down beside Jiang Lizhua and facing Yuqi Song. Pavilion Master Yuqi, why are you here today? Jiang Yuqing had a gentle and polite smile on his face, and he couldn't find anything wrong with it. Yuqi Song glanced at Jiang Lizhua hesitantly. Jiang Lizhua sneered in his heart, but he laughed on the surface. Since Yuqing is already here, I still have something to do, so I'll leave first. Then he left very straightforwardly. When the door closed again, Jiang Yuqing looked at Yuqi Song again. Pavilion Master Yuqi, what do you have to say? Can you say it now? Yuqi Song didn't answer him immediately as his sharp and cold gaze slowly swept across Jiang Yuqing. After a moment, he said, Eldest young Master Jiang, why do you have the smell of blood on you? Jiang Yuqing's expression froze. Before I came, I had specially washed the bloodstains on my face and body, and I even changed my clothes. How did Yuqi Song still discover it? He forcefully calmed himself down and smiled slightly. Pavilion Master Yuqi, you're really impressive. You can even detect this. As he spoke, he raised his hand. I accidentally scratched my hand previously, and I simply cleaned it up just now. It's no wonder that you would smell this bloody smell. His hand was wrapped in gauze and dark red blood stains seeped out. It was obvious that he was injured not long ago. Also, I couldn't see what the wound was like. Yuqi Song's eyes darkened. Could there really be such a coincidence in this world? I wanted to check his cultivation level, so I hid my aura. I wanted to look at his wrist, but his hand was bandaged. Jiang Yuqing's wrist was also covered by his wide sleeves, so I couldn't see it clearly. He really put in a lot of effort, Yuqi Song sneered in his heart. Jiang Yuqing is simply exposing himself. I see. Eldest young Master Jiang should be more careful. This time it was scratched, but next time it might not be so. Jiang Yuqing's pupils constricted. Yi Song is warning me? This old man is indeed here today for one thing. Yuqi Song didn't seem to notice the change in Jiang Yuqing's expression, and simply changed the topic. This old man remembers that the key to Thousand View Garden seems to be with you? Hearing Thousand View Garden, Jiang Yuqing's heart suddenly jumped. He forced a smile on his stiff face. That's right. The key there is indeed in my custody. Pavilion Master Yuqi, why are you asking this? Yuqi Song let out a long sigh. Actually, it's not a big deal. It's just that when this old man went to Thousand View Garden a day ago, I suddenly remembered that this old man had once given the Empress a few things when I was alive. They were all placed in the zither room of Thousand View Garden. Now that she's gone, this old man wants to take back those things as a memento. Jiang Yuqing furrowed his brows undetectably. You said that there are things that belong to you in the zither room? Yuqi Song nodded and began to count seriously. On her 10th birthday, this old man personally carved the wandering dragon wolf brush for her. On her 13th birthday, this old man prepared the zither pluck for her. Before she married you, at this point he suddenly stopped. The room fell into a dead silence. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 579. Look at this old man's memory. That's all in the past. There's no point in talking about it anymore. After all, you're already engaged to the third princess. Yuchi Song seemed to have just reacted, and a trace of disappointment and anxiety flashed across his face. You don't mind, do you? The smile on Jiang Yuqing's face became even stiffer. How can that be? You're right. But some things have already happened, and there's no way to undo them. He paused for a moment, and with great difficulty, he suppressed the anger in his chest before speaking the rest of his words smoothly. Do you mean that you want to take back all these things now? Yuchi Song said with a bitter smile. This old man really has no choice. More than a year ago, the Chongshu Pavilion was ransacked. This old man has many things related to the Empress, but almost all of them were lost. In addition, the Chongshu Pavilion can't make ends meet. Those are the only things this old man has left for the Empress. As Jiang Yuqing listened, he became more and more annoyed in his heart. He forced himself to wait for Wei Qi Song to finish before saying, Pavilion Master Yuqi, I can understand your feelings. How about this? I'll personally go back and retrieve the things. After packing them up, I'll send them to the Chongshu Pavilion. How about that? Yuchi Song looked troubled. It's not impossible, but those things are quite fragmented. This old man doesn't want to trouble others. It's more appropriate for me to go personally. The smile on Jiang Yuqing's face froze slightly, and his tone became a little cold. Pavilion Master Yuqi, it's not that I don't want to give you the key, but you know that it's a place that the Empress cared about very much when she was alive. Whether it's for her or for us, it's very important. We've always tried our best to keep everything inside intact for fear of destroying it. Now that you want to retrieve the item, the most suitable way is for me to help you retrieve it. Don't worry, whatever you want, just tell me. I'll definitely help you do it. These words were already quite polite, but there was also a hint of irrefutable strength. When ordinary people heard this, they would understand that Jiang Yuqing didn't intend to hand over the key. But Yuchi Song wasn't an ordinary person. Moreover, he had come today to find trouble with Jiang Yuqing. Therefore, he also said very firmly, Don't worry. This old man will only go in for a moment. I won't damage anything inside. Pavilion Master Yuchi, what? Are you questioning this old Yuchijio? Are you worried about this old me? Yuchi Song's words, at Jiang Yuchi Song, Jiang Yuchi Song's is at ses at this moment, Yuchi's at this moment at Yuchi Song's? Yuchi Song, Yuchi, at yes to the yeses to be at? Yuchi Pavilion Masters is. Yuang Yu Jiang used to me? To Yuchi of course of you, Jiang Yuqing felt aggrieved, but this was probably the only way to get rid of Wei Qi Song. This old man still has matters to attend to, so I'll take my leave first. See you tomorrow at Xenli Garden. Wei Qi Song's tone was firm. Jiang Yuqing was about to say that he didn't have time tomorrow when he saw that Yuchi Song had already stood up and was about to leave. But although eldest young Master Jiang is only slightly injured, you still need to recuperate. You have a lot of things to do at the moment. You can't have any problems, right? These words made Jiang Yuqing feel guilty. He could only swallow the rest of his words and get up to send Yuchi Song out. It wasn't until Yuchi Song left the Jiang mansion that Jiang Yuqing's expression completely turned cold. He was in too much of a hurry today, so he didn't have time to use a better method to conceal his aura. The doubts in Yuchi Song's heart must have not been dispelled, and he would definitely continue to test him. Sunji, this subordinate is here. Today, this young master is going into seclusion. No one is allowed to disturb me. Yes. Night fell, and the bright moon hung high in the sky. Chu Luiwei sat cross-legged in her room with her eyes closed. The force in her body circulated slowly and steadily, and the aura around her gradually strengthened. Then she stretched out her right hand and recalled the Jingshan finger technique in her mind. At the same time, she mobilized the force in her body and surged it toward her index finger. A speck of starlight slowly appeared on her fingertip. A powerful pressure gradually spread out from the top of the tower. Chu Luiwei began to recall the Jingshan palm technique in her mind. At that time, the entire Jingshan technique was engraved on the four walls on the top floor of Tai Yen Academy's library. It included the Jingshan finger, the Jingshan palm, and the Jingshan fist. The level of these three techniques increased with each level, and the corresponding difficulty also gradually increased. She remembered the entire Jingshan technique by heart. She could almost recite it backwards. The first time she cultivated the Jingshan finger, she tried thousands of times before finally succeeding. After that, she would repeatedly practice whenever she had time. Now, she had finally mastered the Jingshan finger technique and could start to move on to the Jingshan palm technique. In her mind, the silver light gradually gathered and transformed into a blurry figure. Chu Liwei could barely recognize that it seemed to be a man, but she could not identify anything else. He raised his hand, and a speck of starlight appeared on his index finger. Then, the speck of starlight suddenly dispersed into a few specks of starlight and landed lightly on his other fingers. The silver light quickly enveloped his entire palm. He flipped his wrist and pushed the palm out. Thousands of specks of light bloomed. Chu Liwei opened her eyes and looked at her right hand. She focused on the speck of light on her fingertip and began to try to disperse it. However, the speck of starlight did not have any reaction. Chu Liwei seemed to have expected this result. There was no surprise or disappointment on her face. Instead, she was even more determined to continue. Back then, in order to condense the silver speck of starlight on her index finger, she had failed countless times before finally succeeding. Now that she had to disperse it, it was equivalent to multitasking. Naturally, it was even more difficult. She circulated the force in her body again and tried again. Failure. Failure again. Failure again. The moonlight shone in from the window and shone on her body, dragging her shadow extremely long. She seemed to have entered a meditative state as she stared at her palm from beginning to end. If it were not for the force circulating around her body, one would almost think that she was a statue. Time flew by quickly. Every time she tried, the thick force would surge out from her dantian and spread to her limbs and bones. As a result, Chu Liu's Yuan meridian also experienced the cleansing of energy time and time again, and became stronger and wider. A night passed. When the morning sun shone down, Chu Liu's fingertip finally separated a small speck of light and landed on her thumb. On her hand, two faint silver specks flickered and shone brightly. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 580. Chu Liwei could not hide her joy as she looked at the two balls of light in her hands. She had finally made a breakthrough. Although she had only released one ball of starlight, it was already an excellent start. Chu Liwei waved her finger, and the light quietly dissipated. After circulating her force for one circulatory cycle, she packed up and left the room. She had not slept all night, but she was not sleepy at all. Instead, she felt more energetic. She went to the herb garden alone. The herbs she planted did not wither as quickly as before. Instead, they grew smoothly. Chu Liwei carefully took care of them. After that, her senior brothers and sisters came one after another. However, they were not here to see her this time. They were here to see the herbs. Although the pavilion master said that the herb garden had returned to normal, they were still a little worried, so they could not help but come early in the morning to take a look. They did not expect Chu Liwei to be here earlier than them. Moreover, judging from her clean and neat technique, she was clearly very good at this. Everyone was delighted, and they praised Chu Liwei even more. Little junior sister was even more amazing than they had imagined. Even Elder Xia Yi came to see her. However, compared to the others, he did not say much. He only went up to Chu Liwei and said seriously, "Thank you. Thank you, Li." Chu Liwei blinked. When she saw Elder Xia Yi's expression, she immediately guessed that he must have learned about the messed yuan gravel. Her eyes curved into crescents. "You're welcome, Elder Xia. I'm a disciple of the Chongshu Pavilion, so it's my duty to do this." Elder Xia Yi sighed. "I wonder what kind of luck we have. Could it be that the heavens have finally decided to make it up to us because we've suffered too much? The only pity was that both Chu Luiyue and Chang Wanzhou had chosen Yuchi Song as their master. Actually, I'm not much worse than the pavilion master. Sai, why didn't you choose me? Elder Xia Yi stroked his beard. Hee, before you came, the pavilion master would stay on the mountain for a month or so. Now that I've accepted the two of you as my disciples, why are you running down the mountain frequently every day? Only then did Chu Luiyue remember that after Yuchi Song went to the Jiang mansion yesterday, she had not seen him and had not asked him about the investigation. Master went down the mountain again today? He left just now. They should be halfway up the mountain by now, right? Chu Luiyue felt a little strange. Could it be that he didn't see Jiang Yuqing yesterday, so he went there again today? Elder Xiaoyi, do you know where Master went today? Are we going to the Jiang mansion? Elder Xia Yi shook his head. That's not it. He went to Exenli Garden today. Chu Luiyue was stunned. Why did she go to Exenli Garden again? Seeing Chu Luiyue's bewildered expression, Elder Xia Yi explained. In fact, he went there today to bring some things with him. You should know that the pavilion master used to have a very good relationship with the crown princess, so she put many things there. Chu Luiyue's eyelids twitched. Are you saying that master is actually going to the zither room today? Elder Xia Yi asked in surprise. How do you know that? Chu Luiyue paused and said softly, I'm sorry. I've heard master mention it before. Elder Xia Yi nodded without suspecting anything. I see. You're right. He did go there. According to him, it seems that he's going to bring those things back. In fact, he did mention it before, but he was afraid that it would hurt him if he saw them, so he just left them there. I don't know why, but he suddenly changed his mind. Chu Luiyue's mind raced. That day, the three-eyed eagle said that the purple gold Bodhi leaf seemed to be near the zither room. If I can go with Yuchi Song this time, I can go there legitimately. At the thought of this, she immediately said goodbye to Elder Xia Yi and left in a hurry. Elder Xia Yi looked at her disappearing figure with a confused look on his face. Why are both master and disciple acting so strange? Chu Luiyue was very fast. When she reached the foot of the mountain, she finally caught up with Yuchi Song. Master. Yuchi Song turned around. Luyu? Why are you here? Chu Luiyue quickly walked to his side, and beads of sweat had already formed on her forehead. Master, I heard from Elder Xia Yi that you're going to Exenli Garden today? Yuchi Song nodded. Yes. Seeing that Chu Luiyue seemed to be in a hurry, he asked, Oh, right. When I came back yesterday, I wanted to look for you. But you and Wanzhou seemed to be cultivating, so I didn't disturb you. The day before yesterday, Chu Luiyue gave Chang Wanzhou a few more pills. Now, he was indeed busy dispelling the cold, evil energy in his body. Upon hearing Yuchi Song's words, Chu Luiyue's heart suddenly felt like it was being squeezed by something. So, what did you find? Yuchi Song paused for a moment, then lowered his voice and said slowly, He concealed his aura. He concealed his aura, and his hand was injured. Although it hasn't been confirmed yet, but it should be him. Chu Luiyue held her breath. I knew it. With so much evidence pointing to Jiang Yuqing, she was basically certain in her heart. She wasn't shocked to hear this result, but she felt a little conflicted. After her death, Jiang Yuqing still didn't let her people off. In fact, she had implicated the Chongshu Pavilion. She pondered for a moment and finally said, Master, I'd like to go to Exenli Garden with you. Yuchi Song froze for a moment and didn't quite agree. Luyu, I actually have something to do this time, I know. Chu Luiyue looked at him fixedly. Perhaps I can help you? Yuchi Song didn't speak for a long time. He could tell that Chu Luiyue really wanted to go. She should also know that he was going to the piano room to get something. There must be a reason for her to be so persistent. Master? Chu Luiyue's tone carried a hint of longing. Yuchi Song's heart settled. All right, I'll take you there. But after you arrive, you must stay by Master's side and don't act rashly. Chu Luiyue immediately said, Thank you, Master. Looking at her smiling eyes that were like a galaxy, the last bit of hesitation in Yuchi Song's heart completely disappeared. If she didn't want to say, then he wouldn't ask. She was a child who was willing to gamble her life for the Chongshu Pavilion. Why wouldn't he trust her? No matter what, he just needed to protect her. Let's go. When Yuchi Song and Chu Luiwei arrived at the entrance of Xenli Garden, Jiang Yuqing was already waiting for them. Seeing Chu Luiwei following behind Yuchi Song, Jiang Yuqing frowned imperceptibly. Why is Chu Luiwei here too? But he still walked forward with a calm expression. Pavilion Master Yuchi. Chu Luiwei's gaze fell on Jiang Yuqing. As expected, he used a yuan tool to conceal his aura. The gauze on his hand had clearly been changed, and there was nothing strange about it. It was just a glance, but she quickly withdrew her gaze. Jiang Yuqing walked to Yuchi Song and stood in front of him. He glanced at him lightly and smiled. Pavilion Master Yuchi, you didn't seem to have said yesterday that you would bring someone else today. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 581. Yuchi Song chuckled and said, because I happen to have something to hand over to Lu Yu, so I asked her to come along. Young Master Jiang, you won't mind, right? Jiang Yuqing's smile didn't change, but his tone was a little cold. Pavilion Master Yuchi is too polite. It's just that this zither room is a little special. Me accompanying you here today is already an exception. I'm afraid unrelated people can't go in. Chu Luiwei raised her eyebrows slightly. Unrelated people? Jiang Yuqing was getting better and better at talking. He hadn't really taken the position yet, but he was already putting himself in such a high position. Wasn't he afraid that he would accidentally fall to his death in the future? That place was originally her place. Why did Jiang Yuqing become the master in the end? When Yuchi Song heard the last sentence, his expression didn't look too good. Lu Yu is this old man's last disciple, not some random person. Young Master Jiang, please be careful with your words in the future. Jiang Yuqing had only said it casually. He didn't take Chu Luiwei seriously at all. He didn't expect Yuchi Song's attitude to be so unyielding. It seemed that he didn't think highly of Chu Luiwei. He laughed. Pavilion Master Yuchi, don't be angry. I didn't mean it. Don't take it to heart. I'm just trying to protect the princess's zither room, aren't I? Lu Yu is a child who knows her limits. Moreover, this old man brought her here personally. You don't have to worry. Ever since he knew that Jiang Yuqing was most likely the mastermind behind the destruction of their entire Chongshu Pavilion, Yuchi Song didn't have much patience with him and spoke much more harshly. Jiang Yuqing choked for a moment and could only say, Pavilion Master Yuchi, I'm naturally at ease. Please. After saying that, he took the lead and walked in. Yuchi Song and Chu Luiwei followed closely behind. As Jiang Yuqing walked, he was secretly puzzled. For some reason, the Yuchi Song seemed to have changed a lot recently. In the past, he was always very dispirited and was too lazy to pay attention to many things. As long as it wasn't too overboard, he would usually let it go. But now, he seemed to be much more energetic and sharp than before. Could it be because of the mixed yuan gravel? In the past 2 days, he had sent people to inquire about Chang Wanzhou. He had come from Nanjiang. If he wasn't wrong, he should have guessed that there was a problem with the messed yuan gravel. Who was the one who did it? Jiang Yuqing thought about it for a whole night, but he still couldn't figure out who had removed the messed yuan gravel in the Chongshu Pavilion. Yuchi Song was injured and had never recovered. It couldn't be him. That left Xia Yi as the most likely candidate. The few of them walked together and soon arrived at Thousand View Garden. Chu Luiwei walked forward without looking sideways. His expression was calm, but he was secretly determining the position of the guards around him. No one was more familiar with everything here than she was. She knew exactly where the guards were and where the hiding places were. Compared to the last time they were here, there were obviously fewer people on guard here. But it was still very strict. And the closer they got to the zither room, the more so. Chu Luiwei sneered in his heart. If it wasn't for his guilty conscience, why would Jiang Yuqing guard this place so tightly? Even when Yuchi Song came to pick up a few things, he had to accompany her personally. Was he afraid that someone would discover something? After walking for a while, a lake appeared in front of them. There was a winding corridor on the lake, and opposite it was a small building. It was quiet, elegant, quiet, and peaceful. That was her former zither room. When she was free or in a bad mood, she would often come here. However, when she saw it again, her state of mind was completely different. Because back then, it was here that she drank the last cup of tea that Jianghu made. Since then, everything had changed drastically. In other words, this was actually the place where Jianghu officially began to plot against her. So, of course, he would pay special attention to this place. Jianghu stood in front and turned around. Pavilion Master Wei Qi, the zither room is ahead. I'll go in with you. But, his gaze fell on Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue's lips curled up. Master, go with young Master Jiang. I'll wait for you here. Yuchi Song nodded. I'll be back soon. With that, he stepped onto the winding corridor on the lake with Jianghu and headed towards the zither room. Chu Luiyue stood where he was and looked at their backs with a smile. Jianghu seemed to have suddenly sensed something and turned around to take a look. By the lake in the distance, the woman in red stood gracefully. There was a faint smile on her beautiful face as she looked at him from afar. Because there was a distance between them, her face and figure were a little blurry. But it was this blur that made her resemble a person. Jianghu's heart thumped violently. In an instant, almost the same scene appeared in his mind. A woman in exquisite palace attire, with a graceful figure, stood with a smile on her face. She was graceful and luxurious, but also beautiful and moving. Like the sun in the clouds, she was brilliant and dazzling. No one dared to blaspheme her, but she always had an extreme attraction, making people unconsciously yearn for her. At that time, she had also stood by the lake like this, smiling at him. The two figures gradually overlapped, causing his mind to be in chaos. Jianghu closed his eyes fiercely. When he opened them again, he found that Chu Luiyue had already sat down on the jade wall by the lake. It was paved with carefully selected clear jade. It was clear and moist, and when the water rippled, it could reflect the light of the waves. The two figures that were almost completely merged suddenly separated. He shook his head, but a faint contempt grew in his heart. As expected of an ordinary background, his description and bearing were so careless. In the end, there was still a difference between heaven and earth. He turned his head. Chu Luiyue sat there, gently swinging his legs, one hand intentionally or unintentionally rubbing the jade beside him. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.